And that, seems to me, is absolutely spot on.
Putting Your Money Where Your Mouth Is was presented by Giles Fraser and produced by Martin Rosenbaum. As top scientists warn of the risks of artificial intelligence, should we fear super intelligent machines? That's the question in analysis after this.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Hello, this is Alan, BBC Radio. How are you?
Don't Log Off is a series of online, random conversations with people across the world.
Are you enjoying your life in Malaysia, Syria, Tanzania?
I'm back where I belong.
I always feel a little bit nervous before I log on. I never know who is out there or what story they've got to tell me.
I said to myself, I'm not going to die like this in this situation.
Join me, Alan Dean, in Don't Log Off. Back this Friday morning at 11. And then on the BBC Radio 4 website.
Lovely to hear your voice too.
Now on Radio 4 Analysis, Helena Merriman asks whether we should fear the rise of super smart machines.
At the start of this year, a group of robot makers, ethicists and programmers did something they'd never done before. They signed an open letter urging those working in artificial intelligence to develop safety measures so that in the future, AI doesn't do more harm than good. One of the signatories was the leading physicist, Stephen Hawking, who said this in a recent BBC interview.
I think the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race.
What does Professor Hawking mean by full artificial intelligence? Well, he's distinguishing it from narrow artificial intelligence, such as speech recognition, or that automated voice when you call your bank. By full artificial intelligence, Professor Hawking is referring to a scenario where machines match human intelligence, with the ability to reason and understand the complexities of language and emotion.
Once humans develop artificial intelligence, it would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate. Humans, who are limited by slow biological evolution, couldn't compete and would be superseded.
Elon Musk, the technology entrepreneur, has also warned about the future of AI, describing it as humanity's greatest threat, more dangerous than nuclear weapons. These warnings made headlines around the world, yet there's more to it than this. Over the last 3 years, investors have poured billions of dollars into AI startups. In the near future, there are fears about how AI could affect jobs, weapons and financial systems. But this programme is not about those more immediate threats. Instead, I want to find out whether the risks described by Professor Hawking and others are real. If machines one day become as smart as us, could that threaten our very existence? Of course, fears about artificial intelligence aren't new.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
In 1968, Stanley Kubrick's film 2001, A Space Odyssey, brought those fears to life.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
How realistic is this dystopian vision of machine intelligence? To answer that, we need to start by finding out what could go wrong if machines become as clever as us.
It's too long been the domain of myths and entertainment and science fiction and kind of idle speculation. But it looks like some powerful technologies could pose significant existential risks, and we need to take those seriously.
This is Swedish philosopher Nick Bostrom. He's a philosopher with an unusual background. He studied physics, computational neuroscience and mathematical logic, and founded the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford University, where he thinks about what humanity's greatest threats are. Professor Bostrom says there's one moment above all that we need to get right. And that's the very first time we invent a machine that has human intelligence.
AI is not just a tool. It's not just one more clever little invention or a cool new gadget. It's the last invention that humans will ever need to make, inasmuch as the superintelligence would then be better at inventing than we would So it would be critical to get it right on the first try.
And if we don't get it right?
The bulk of the risk is not in machines being evil or hating humans or feeling resentful because we have enslaved them or anything like that, but rather that they are indifferent to humans and that in pursuit of their own goals, we humans would suffer as a side effect.
Here's an example.
Suppose you had an AI, a super intelligent AI, whose only goal was to make as many paper clips as possible. Or maybe you've built this to run your paperclip factory. Now imagine that you were this AI and you're trying to select every action to maximize the number of paperclips that will exist in the future. You also can reflect that human bodies consist of atoms, and those atoms could be used to make a lot of really nice paperclips. It's not that you hate humans or feel resentful, it's just you want paperclips. It turns out that in the pursuit of this, you would have instrumental reasons to do things that would be harmful to humanity. The same holds for almost any other goal you might plug in instead of paperclips.
But some people would say, look, we haven't understood the brain yet, so how can we know whether we can design a machine that could replicate the brain?
One way that we could eventually replicate that in machines would be just to reverse engineer the human brain, like figure out exactly how it is that the human brain goes about doing this.
And it's this point that's at the very heart of the debate around artificial intelligence. Before we ask whether we should fear AI, we need to know whether it's even possible for machines to attain human intelligence. Is Nick Bostrom right when he says the brain can be reverse engineered and then replicated in a machine?
My prime interest has always been how it's possible for the mind to exist and how it works.
This is Margaret Bowden. She's a professor of cognitive science and has spent the last 50 years using computational models to study the mind. She even has a robot named after her.
Yes, there's a robot. Yes, it's called Maggie. It's a sort of little round thing which thunders about on the floor, but it does some rather interesting things.
Maggie, the human, is sceptical about little round things like Robot Maggie ever catching up to its namesake.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if there will never be a human-level intelligence in AI.
Here's a story she tells to explain why. It might not immediately seem relevant, but stick with it.
Well, there's this fairy story of the fisherman who goes out fishing and he catches this huge fish, more beautiful and more large than he's ever seen before. And as it takes it out of the water, it actually starts talking. And it says to him, "Oh, please, please, I don't want to die. Throw me back in the water. If you throw me back in the water, I will give you 3 wishes, anything you like."
He doesn't go for the obvious option, to wish for more wishes. They never seem to do that in fairy stories. Instead,
he says, well, my first wish is, because my son is a soldier out fighting in the war, and we haven't seen him for several years, so my first wish is that my son would come home. And my second wish is, well, my wife and I, we don't have very much money, so it would be lovely to have £30,000. That would make a huge, huge difference to our life. And he says that the third wish, well, I'm not quite sure. That's not so easy. Can I come back tomorrow?
The fish agrees, and he throws it back in the water. The fisherman goes home. Moments later,
there's a knock at the door, and they bring his son back into the house in a coffin. And 10 minutes after that, there's another knock at the door. It's the postman. The postman gives him a letter, which he opens, and there's a cheque for £30,000 in it from the life insurance company.
Substitute a machine for the fish, and you understand the point she's making. The fish machine responds with a limited, literal form of intelligence. Was there a third wish?
Oh, sorry, yes, the third wish, he goes back and says, please can you undo my first 2 wishes?
It's always the get-out clause in those kinds of stories.
Yes.
Professor Bowden accepts that machines are better than us at some narrow tasks, like searching through masses of data in an instant. But she's doubtful they'll ever develop a form of human, general intelligence.
The time and effort and money that would be needed to really try to match human intelligence at a general level, I don't think will be put into it, because if you want a human intelligence, there's a very easy way of getting it, namely, get more human beings.
More money, time and effort is being put into AI. So it seems as though the will exists. But she says there's a more fundamental reason why computers won't outsmart us.
The brain doesn't work by magic, and the brain is, in some sense, underneath all of our psychological capacities. So I'm not saying it's in principle impossible, but the human mind is hugely complex, and we'd need to understand it very, very well at a theoretical level in order to have an AI that matched it. We're nowhere near that yet, and I wouldn't be surprised if we never get there.
AI research is now moving away from attempts to replicate the mind towards efforts to simulate the brain. The EU is now funding an ambitious project to map the human brain, and AI researchers say that through scanning techniques, it's now possible to see connections between neurons forming and firing in real time. The idea is that once you understand how individual neurons work, you can simulate them on a computer. Other AI researchers say that it's through techniques such as deep learning, where computers find patterns in big data that will reach superhuman intelligence. Professor Bowden is sceptical about all of these.
Psychological things, mental things, have to be understood at the psychological level as well as at the neural level.
So how would you describe what you think are the greatest challenges for machines achieving human intelligence? What are those areas where you think they just won't be able to match it?
Well, understanding of language is the obvious first one. I mean, that is hugely difficult, hugely rich, hugely subtle. We don't know how language works in the human level. I mean, we don't know, but we certainly do know that it involves understanding of things at a very basic semantic level, which AI, as yet, hasn't reached.
But that hasn't stopped scientists from trying.
I'm Brian Christian, and in 2009 I was named the most human at the Loebner Prize Turing Test competition.
Brian Christian, like our other interviewees, combines an eclectic mix of disciplines. He's an author and poet with degrees in computer science and philosophy, but he's perhaps proudest of the title awarded to him 6 years ago at the Turing Test competition.
It's on the one hand a literary battle, competitive conversation, but more importantly, it's a competition that has this central place in the history of 20th century philosophy as really kind of staking this claim of what does it mean to think.
The Turing test dates back to a paper written by the famous codebreaker Alan Turing in 1950, in which he proposed a practical experiment to find out whether machines could think like humans. The test was never done in his lifetime, but since 1991 it's become an annual event. A panel of judges has a 5-minute chat via a computer with AI programs and humans. They have to then guess which is a machine and which is a person. In 2009, Brian Christian was defending the human race with some vigour.
I didn't want to lose. The honour of your whole species is on the line, so it's a big deal.
He spent 6 months preparing for the big day.
I was poring over the transcripts and trying to look for patterns in the cases where computers had fooled judges in the past. And I talked with experts in artificial intelligence, but also linguists and psychologists and philosophers, and I asked them all, what are the things that the human mind is uniquely good at?
Or, to put it another way, what are computers not so good at? Take chatbots, computer programs that replicate human dialogue.
They're constructed literally by piecing together this papier-mâché of fragments of other human conversations, in some cases tens of millions of different human conversations. And so you have this uncanny experience when you're talking to these chatbots. Every single answer makes total sense, but there's somehow this feeling that every time you ask it a question, a different person is answering you.
It's not easy to understand what this means without trying it out. So I decided to have a chat with one of these chatbots myself. I chose one called Cleverbot, a chatbot invented by the British AI developer Rollo Carpenter, which took part in that